Welcome to the March 15th, 2021 Jamestown Rotary meeting. Please welcome John Healy, who is our, not Vice President, yes, Vice President, excuse me, Vice President, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and then the four-way test.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and
to the republic for which
one
it
nation
stands,
under God,
one nation under God,
indivisible, and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Is it
Is it
fair?
fair to all concerned?
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will it build
better will
goodwill
and
and
good
better
Will
friendships?
be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it be beneficial to all?
All concerned. Thank you, John. Who will I pick next week? If you really want to do it, let me know. All right, let's welcome Mary Schiller, who will give us our invocation today.
Okay, afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with a few words from Martin Luther King. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. So now, as we all gather as members of Rotary, let us renew our obligation to fulfill that expectation, just as the return of spring renews growth in the works around us, with a new commitment to help others in our community, our nation, and our world. We pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and to our community. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Do we have any visiting Rotarians or guests? I do believe Joanna Dahlbeck is with us, who is going to be going through new membership training on Thursday. Remind me again. Oh, yes, go ahead, Diana.
I have a guest today. My husband Lou is joining us.
Lou!
Hey, Lou.
Howdy.
And he's joining.
Lou? Who's Lou?
Who's Lou? Well, he's joining us. He's finishing up his term as president of the board of CAP. So he's very thrilled to have CAP as the program today.
Yes. Good segue. So we welcome Beth Oakes, the executive director of CAP, and Kayleah Feser, who is one of her staff people who's going to speak to us as well. Do we have any other guests? We have Dave Painter's with us today. He hasn't been able to be to a meeting in quite a while, so we're really happy you're here, David.
Thank you.
Any other? I don't see any other names I don't know, so that's everybody. Wonderful. Today, we'll recognize our Rotarily Yours recorder. My lottery tells me it's Chris Anderson. Is that true? Yes, I got a thumbs up. Good. Tonight is the virtual kickoff for the district conference. Not very many of us have signed up for it or registered. I'm sending you an email at about 1 o'clock today that has the registration links right in it for each night. And so for tonight, it's the kickoff, and our laundromat libraries is part of the evening's fair. So they're showcasing the little lending libraries. So thank you, Literacy Committee. They're having awards, the RI Beer Fellowship, whatever that is, and past District Governor Steve Lack will be there. So I'm going to it. It's from 7 to 9 tonight. And then Tuesday night, it's about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The new Rotary International president coming in, Jennifer Jones from up in Canada. She is going to be speaking. Thursday night, March 18th, it's the future of Rotary. So they're focusing on the youth and Rotaract and those clubs. And Saturday from 9 a.m. till noon is an international service project. So that'd be interesting. Has to do with some service projects in Kenya, Uganda, and St. Martin. So that sounds like an interesting conference. So those links are going to be sent to you at 1 o'clock, so you can sign up for any of those. And we'd really like to see the participation if possible.
Joni,
Our-
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So if maybe we can't do the whole 7 to 9 or something like that, should
Yeah.
we register anyway? Or if we're not sure we'll be available, I'm going to be
Yeah.
on the road. So we should go
Yeah.
ahead and register?
I think you should. And you can participate in what you can participate in.
Okay.
Our club still needs a treasurer, so keep thinking about that and let me know. Any announcements from the club?
Joni, I just
Share
like to
people?
tag on to what you said before. They are going to, there's a video of the presentation of our citation. So that's going to be part of tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And also Thursday night, there's a couple of really good, it's a youth program, youth focus for the program, but there's a couple of really good speakers. I've heard one of them before, this Evan Burrell. And so I highly recommend anybody who has any interest in youth, you don't have to be on the committee or anything, but he's a really great speaker and I highly recommend it.
Thank you. Oh, I know one thing I forgot. There'll be a board meeting on Friday at 9 o'clock. Lisa sent out the email to get it all started already. So board members keep that in mind.
Joni, I just have a quick announcement. Unfortunately, I did find out that we won't be doing any of our mock interviews this school year. I confirmed that this morning. We figured that would be the case, but I just wanted to update everybody. But we'll be back in full force in the fall.
Okay.
Good. Thank you so much.
Joni,
And
anybody, all of us should tune in tonight and see our project, our literacy project featured in support of our committee. They've done a fantastic job and they were chosen to be highlighted in tonight's district conference. So tune in at least for that and support the efforts of our own club.
it's real easy to register. You'll get the email at 1 o'clock. You open it up, you click on the registration link and it comes right back to you. So you're good. Very easy. Any other announcements? Don?
Yeah, I wanted to make the notice that a good friend of mine, Bud Black, died this weekend. Bud was a Falcon, a Rotarian, and a great guy, great sense of humor. I'm sorry he didn't make it to St. Patrick's Day this year.
Yeah. And Greg, you pointed out that we lost one of the servers that used to help us service at lunch.
Yeah, she was server at the hotel when it was the Holiday Inn. She's a great gal.
Doris passed away. All right, let's move on to our Rotary Why. John Lloyd's going to tell us why.
Okay. I, not from Jamestown, and back long ago, back in the late 60s, I moved to Jamestown to take a job as a junior accountant with Seidman and Seidman, and didn't know anybody. So well, first of all, thought I'd join a club of some kind we could meet people, Jeannie and I. And I got into the JCs in Lakewood, and most of the people that I knew at that time lived in Lakewood. We still don't live in Jamestown. We live outside Jamestown in West Ellicott, but had a lot of ties to Lakewood. So I got there and then ended up wanting to get into Rotary because I was talking to some people about Rotary, and some people in Lakewood said, well, why don't you, we're starting a Rotary club in Lakewood. So I joined that. I was one of the first people in that club. And then I was in the eye doctor's office, and the eye doctor I had at that time insisted that I transfer into the Jamestown Rotary. And because it was a good place to meet people, and I knew then at that time a lot about Rotary because I had been a member on a board of directors at Lakewood, but it just was a great fit for me because it's just a great club and still is. And at that time, I got to know most of the people in Jamestown. And the best part, as I remember about Rotary, is that the people, the whole Rotary is designed to have people in different areas of business or work to get together. And I think that's, to me, the greatest part of Rotary. The four-way test is really what drew me to that. But meeting the people and the great people I've met and the great times I've had since actually 1978, Greg Jones was my sponsor, and he was the eye doctor that forced me in the eye chair that I was in and wouldn't let me out until I joined the Jamestown Club. So thank you, Greg. It's been a great many years of Rotary.
Thanks, John. All right, let's welcome Stacy Hannon, our program committee person for March, and she's going to introduce our speaker.
All righty, I'll be happy to. For Beth Oakes, Executive Director. Beth has worked in a nonprofit sector for over 20 years. Most recently, she works as the Executive Director. She did go, was the Executive Director at the YWCA for 18 years. There, she worked hard to further issues around women and their children. She led the way to take over the administration of the supervised visitation program because it would help provide a safe and supportive environment for children when they have to visit someone that they may not feel safe with. As well as she was very involved in the Coalition for Women and served on their advisory board. Prior to this, she worked in the district attorney's office as the Victim Witness Assistance Program. This included working with the very first multidisciplinary team for children, abused and neglected. Beth was asked to travel to Erie County and visit their new Child Advocacy Center and work to bring this same program to Chautauqua County. After she left there, she was part of 2 joint efforts with the local agencies to write for funding for the Child Advocacy Center and multidisciplinary team. That was very successful for her. She says that she feels she has come full circle to a part of working with the Child Advocacy Center. And let's see here, she oversees office at CAP. She has 14 staff. She has been there since March of 2018 and has been able to add on 2 full staff that speak Spanish, a forensic interviewer, and a family advocate. This was a need that had been identified by the board and the staff at some time. And we welcome Beth Oakes, Director of CAP.
Thank you. Just going to share my screen here. So for those of you who might be wondering what the Child Advocacy Program, or CAP, has been doing during the last year, we have been open still. We remained open because we were considered an essential service. And at the Child Advocacy Program, all services are free because we receive grants. So everyone has availability and access. We work with children who've have experienced sexual abuse, neglect, or they may have witnessed something traumatic. Could be the death or suicide of a family member, or severe injury, or a lot of different things that would have been traumatic to the children. Okay, see if I can move this down here. Whoops, just a second here. What's happening here? Okay, there we go. We're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to end child abuse in Chautauqua County. And when that abuse occurs, we coordinate a community response to bring healing, hope, and justice to children and families. And part of that is our multidisciplinary team, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. I'm planning just to lightly touch on the services that CAP provides and leave the majority of the time for the human trafficking director to speak. So if you have additional questions, please feel free to contact me after this. Child sexual abuse is one of the most prevalent health problems children face, and it has the most serious array of consequences. And this comes from the website Darkness to Light, which provides a lot of resources for work in this field. Research indicates about 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. Children that are sexually abused are 3 times more likely to abuse drugs or alcohol, 2 times more likely to drop out of school, and at higher risk for mental and physical health issues lasting into adulthood. I am certain that's not a big surprise to you. That would be the same with any sort of a trauma, but this is a statistic about being sexually abused. In 2020, we saw 480 children, and about 2/3 of them were female. And that's a typical statistics for us since I came. It's been that 2/3 girls, 1/3 boy split. The statistic that I was very surprised about when I first came here was how many children that we work with that are in that 0 to 6 category. As you can see, that's 22%, 35% is 7 to 12, and 43% is 13 to 18. And I'm sure you've all heard about stranger danger. Stranger danger is an important thing to know, but 99% of the children are abused by someone they know, someone that has inserted themselves into their lives as a family friend, could be a family member, could be a neighbor, a babysitter, a youth leader, a Girl Scout person, someone that can have that time to cultivate a relationship with that child of trust in order to abuse them and have them keep it a secret. So it's usually somebody that they are fairly close to. It might be somebody that they think that they love and may do some nice things for them. So that makes it all kind of messed up for the kid when they come forward and tell their story. There's a lot of feelings involved in that. We had 170 forensic interviews. About 2/3 were in our Jamestown office, 28% in the Dunkirk office. And we do also do forensic interviews at the police station or Jones Hill or schools. Sometimes if the parents are maybe suspected in the abuse, we are able to talk with the kids in school where they're safe. We have 2 locations. This is the one you probably know more than others. This is 405 West 3rd Street. Recently, we got our sign blown down in that big windstorm, so we just recently put up a new nice sign. The next picture is our Dunkirk office. We moved there in January of 2021. It's not a great picture because when I was putting this together about 10 days ago, there was heaps of snow there still. And we're waiting for some signage, and then I'll take some better pictures. But this is the old Catholic charity space. We're in the back of the building that has the red in the front of it. And we moved from 7 rooms to 12 rooms, and we're really enjoying the additional space. Meet Willow. Willow is our facility dog. And Willow came to us about a year ago, and she was just like a small child. She was a definite work in progress. You need to train her to do a lot of different things and not to do a lot of different things. And you'll see that big cushy cushion she's lying on. That is called placing. And when she gets on that cushion and we say place, she can stay on that for an hour, hour and a half. So she can be present during a forensic interview or a counseling session or when a child feels anxious. And she does travel back and forth between our Jamestown and Dunkirk offices. So the kids are really enjoying her and they, I think, want to see Willow more than some of us. Why are child advocacy centers important? Without them, the child has to tell their story over and over and over. And when I worked in the DA's office over 20 years ago, I was often the 3rd or 4th person that child was telling, and it's traumatic for them to have to do that. As well, this Child Advocacy Center is a child-focused environment. It's safe, it's very welcoming, and we want children to feel comfortable when they're talking about something that's so traumatic for them. Sometimes when they disclose to an adult may start asking questions. And that's why we like to have that happen when teachers call us or guidance counselors. Just give a call when something like that happens. Don't start asking questions, because sometimes those questions will actually hinder the prosecution should it go to prosecution. And I know none of us want to do that. CAP facilitates the multidisciplinary team. We don't get to see them except via Zoom now, so it's nice to see them all together in a group. Hopefully we'll be able to meet again. They meet once a month in the Jamestown office and once every other month in Dunkirk when we did meet. Now we're meeting via Zoom to talk about cases. And the multidisciplinary team is made up of all these different disciplines, and everyone is just as important to be at the table as the others. And law enforcement agencies, as every law enforcement agency, is invited throughout the county. And we also have advocacy agencies from the Seneca Nation, from the FBI, from the Salvation Army, and we really appreciate their input as they may be working with them in another agency. The multidisciplinary, the purpose of it is to reduce trauma to children who are victims of abuse, and also gives us a good time to be together to share information. Maybe they've moved and we've lost track of them, but CPS knows where they are. Or maybe CPS thinks they're coming to their counseling appointments, but they're not. And it just carves out a special time that we can all talk to each other, because we're very busy people and sometimes it's hard to get a hold of each other. We also can say, what services could we provide for that child and family? What could we do? Training for the community, we cross-train with the disciplines, as well as we also train out in the community. These are the different programs that we do. And as I said, I'm just going to touch on the majority of them so that Kayleah can concentrate on the Safe Harbor Anti-Trafficking Initiative. But they are on our website, and I did leave contact information at the end of this presentation in case you have any questions, and please feel free to ask questions as well. Our family advocates accompany family to court proceedings. They facilitate the protective parenting, which is a 6 to 8 week curriculum for parents whose children have been put in high risk situations or at potential for high risk. They may be mandated to attend these classes as a part of CPS or as a part of being considered for reunification with their families. We coordinate medical exams. We provide a lot of information and referral and support. And people ask all the time, where do you get your referrals? They're most often referred by law enforcement and child protective services, but we do have other sources as well. These are all the different modalities that we provide here at CAP. We try to do all as much as we can evidence-based, and everyone is evidence-based except for play therapy and support groups. We started to venture into play therapy when we got a different clinician 2 years ago, because she was already doing the work, and she's going to be credentialed in play therapy in about probably 15 more months. And we are seeing so many young kids, and sometimes some of the typical types of treatment aren't as effective with them as this play therapy might be. And so we try to meet the kids where they're at and provide different types of therapy to help them. EMDR has been talked about as being a positive type of treatment for trafficking victims. So we have some clinicians trained in that. We'll be training some more, I think, in the next year. Problematic sexual behavior therapy is what no one else wants to talk about, so we get to talk about it. And that's when a kid would offend with another kid. And we have 2 groups that we can run, as well as we can do it individually. We have ages 7 to 12 and ages 13 to 18. And it's developmentally appropriate depending on what level they're at. It's evidence supported, and it's family focused. A parental or caregiver group meets at the same time as the kids meet to help reinforce the principles that the kids are learning during that time. It can go up to 6 months to 9 months, depending how the group progresses. And one thing that they found about PSB is that kids that have come into this program when they have been younger have not gone on to reoffend as adults. And as often, CAP is a reactionary organization that things happen and then we jump in. So it's always nice to be able to do something on the prevention side as well. Forensic interviews provide children with a safe place to tell their story. Our forensic interviewers are highly trained, get ongoing training, go through peer review. We have a Spanish-speaking forensic interviewer as well as a Spanish-speaking family advocate, which has really opened up, especially in Dunkirk, serving a population that was very underserved in this field. So we're excited about that. The child always is asked by the interviewer, what would you do if you felt unsafe? Who could you talk to? Where would you go? They will obtain information that will either support the allegations or maybe they're going to refute the allegations, and will be able to offer a medical and counseling. Forensic medical evaluations are done on site at both CAP offices, at the Chautauqua Center, at Jamestown Pediatrics, at UPMC, and these are done by highly trained medical personnel. And the real purpose of this is to make sure the child doesn't have any diseases, that they're not pregnant. But most of the time, it's because the child might feel funny because something's happened to their body and they feel like everyone else knows and can see it. And this just reassures them that they are healthy and that they're okay. Prevention education that CAP does, Stewards of Children. That's for any adult. That's a 2-hour prevention, child abuse prevention curriculum that we provide, and we're happy to do it at any time. We've been doing a lot of those via Zoom. So if you're interested in that, call us. Less is more we do for those who work with children, and also mandated reporters, daycare centers, other places where people are mandated, and protective parenting, as I mentioned previously. And now I want to introduce Kayleah Feser. Kayleah is our Safe Harbor Director, and she's a licensed master social worker, and she raises awareness about the realities of human trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And in addition to educating and training community members and professionals, she works directly with youth survivors of trafficking. She was born and raised in Chautauqua County, and she is passionate about eradicating gender-based violence and empowering youth and young adults to cultivate and maintain healthy relationships. She graduated from Niagara University and has a master's degree in social work from SUNY Buffalo. Prior to coming to us, Kayleah worked as a social worker for the Center for Elder Law and Justice, a consultant for Chautauqua County's Department of Health and Human Services, and has held various community relations and marketing positions in healthcare organizations throughout Western New York. Additionally, because she has so much spare time, Kayleah works as a behavioral health counselor in a substance use treatment program. She is the co-chair of the Chautauqua County Youth Board, and she's a longtime volunteer with the Girl Scouts of Western New York. Kayleah is a Yoga Alliance registered yoga teacher and can be found leading trauma-informed yoga practices at CAP and throughout Western New York. Kayleah also does yoga exercises for us, as well as she does them when we have our girls group. She's done them in person and she's done them remotely. So she's been a great asset to CAP. Kayleah?
Thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone from the Rotary for having us today. I'm going to jump right in and talk to you about the realities of human trafficking. But before I get into the nuts and bolts of trafficking, I want to give you a little bit of backstory why this is relevant. So 21 years ago now, in the year 2000, federal legislation was passed that really changed the way that we see youth involved in commercial sexual exploitation in our country. Prior to the year 2000, if a youth was engaged in commercial sexual activity, which I'll define in a moment for you, they were considered a child prostitute, but we no longer use that term. And since this federal legislation, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, was passed, under federal law, a child under the age of 18 that is induced into providing commercial sex is considered a victim of trafficking and must be treated as such. So we were really fortunate in late 2016 here in Chautauqua County to start to receive funding from New York State to implement the Safe Harbor program. As you can see on the screen, there's a map of New York State. This is from 2020, so last year, but every county in New York State is funded to some degree for this anti-human trafficking initiative, which is really awesome. And as I said, we started doing that here in late 2016. At that point, this program was coordinated by Jessica McKeever out of the YWCA of Jamestown. And she was hired as a coordinator and worked with schools. I think she was in 13 of our school districts here, 13 out of the 18 school districts, providing age-appropriate prevention education about exploitation and human trafficking. So she was working with elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools to educate their youth on what trafficking is and how to protect themselves. And we found out really quickly that as Jessica was doing these presentations, there was so many youth coming forward that had either had these experiences themselves or somebody close to them had. And so we were getting all these disclosures, and we realized that we really needed to establish more of a response in our community. We could provide this prevention education, but we needed to do something to respond when these things were happening, that we didn't even realize that this level of exploitation was happening here in Chautauqua County. So in the fall of 2019, this program was moved to the Child Advocacy Program, and I was hired as the coordinator. Beth just went through all the different services we have at CAP and our partnerships with the MDT and all of these other service providers. So it just seemed like a natural fit. We were already doing the child sexual abuse cases in our county. So if we can move on to the next slide, Beth, we can see just how well these trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation cases fit in. So if you look at the screen now, we have child sexual abuse on the left. So that's kind of like an umbrella term. Out of that, we have commercial sexual exploitation of children. And that CSEC, for short, refers to a range of crimes and activities involving the sexual abuse or exploitation of a child for the financial benefit of another person, or in exchange for anything of value, given or received by another person. So we have this overarching term of CSEC, or commercial sexual exploitation of children. And out of that, we have 4 different categories. We have child sex trafficking, which I will talk about more extensively in just a moment. We have child sexual abuse images, or CSAM, and that's the newer term for child pornography. So that falls under the guise of the Safe Harbor program. I always like to give this little anecdotal information about CSAM. When we talk about child sexual abuse images, our country was doing a really great job in the 1980s of cutting back on the production and distribution of child pornography. But in the 90s, with the advent of the internet and access to electronic photo sharing, this crime just skyrocketed. In the year 2000, last year, it was estimated that 100,000 new images were uploaded daily of child sexual abuse images. So again, 100,000 new images every day are uploaded, and that's here for IP addresses here in the United States. So you can just see it's a rampant crime that's happening all over the place. We see this a lot with youth that are self-producing and distributing, when they have access to cell phones, tablets, right at their hands, and it's definitely a major issue that we're seeing around here. Also, as part of CSEC, we have stripping and dancing. Pretty obvious. I don't think I need to go into too much of an explanation about that. And then we have survival sex. So that is something we also see a lot of here in Chautauqua County. And just as the name implies, it's having sex for one's survival. So having to have one's basic needs met. So whether that's a place to stay, food to eat, clothes to wear. We've had youth that have exchanged sex for to be able to sleep on somebody's couch if they've been kicked out of their parents' home, or youth that have exchanged sex for a cell phone. They have no way of staying in connection with their support systems, and that, may be what's offered to them. So child sex trafficking. The difference between sex trafficking and those other forms of CSEC is that trafficking always involves a third person or a third party. So you have the trafficker or the pimp, you have the John or the buyer, and the person that's being sold. The legal definition for child sex trafficking is on the screen right now. That's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not obtained 18 years of age yet. So that's, pretty heavy definition, but in short, simply put, trafficking is modern day slavery. It's the commodification of human life. Or in other words, human trafficking is taking advantage of someone for labor and or sex in exchange for something of value. So we primarily focus on child sex trafficking here at the Child Advocacy Program and in the Safe Harbor Initiative, but we do see and we do respond to child labor trafficking in Chautauqua County. So that is an issue that happens here as well. We tend to see the labor trafficking more in the north part of the county where there's more grape fields and a larger agricultural industry. But as I said, we primarily we work with cases that involve child sex trafficking. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. How big is this problem? Is this, to be honest, it's the true prevalence of human trafficking is really hard to know for sure. It's an incredibly underreported crime, and survivors are very unlikely to self-identify. The US Department of Homeland Security estimates that there are approximately 24.9 million victims globally. According to Polaris, who operates the National Human Trafficking Hotline, in 2019, there was just over 22,000 trafficking victims and survivors identified in the United States. Since 2017, when we started to keep this data here in Chautauqua County, we've had 127 youth referred to the Safe Harbor program. Of those 127, 20 met that federal definition of sex trafficking that I read to you on the last slide. Of that 127, so we've got the 20 that meet the federal definition of sex trafficking, and then 81 of those youth were considered to be at a high risk for commercial sexual exploitation or human trafficking. So we use these evidence-supported tools that were provided to us by the Office of Children and Family Services in New York State. And we, as part of this program, we train service providers in the community to use these assessment tools. So when they have youth coming into their programs, whether upon intake or if they notice a change in that child's condition, we ask them to screen for indicators of commercial sexual exploitation of trafficking. And we have a small screening tool and then a comprehensive assessment tool. And then that comprehensive assessment tool helps us delineate what a youth's risk level is. So as I said, we have 81 youth who have been or are considered to be at high risk for trafficking. Of the 127 youth that were referred to the program, the average age of referral is 13.31. So that's pretty consistent with global numbers. It's reported that that the average age to enter trafficking is about 12 years old. So we're kind of right above that here in Chautauqua County. And of the youth that have been referred to the program, 89% identify as female. So that's, pretty consistent with what we see, as Beth has talked about some of the cases, the statistics we see at CAP, and we do have higher numbers of female, but I always like to point out when I'm talking about human trafficking is that it's an incredibly underreported crime in general. People are very unlikely to self-identify, but boys are even less likely to identify. There's a lot of stigma around boys and sexual abuse, boys and trafficking in general. So I don't think that this is indicative of a problem that only happens to females, just girls are more likely to report that. So who is at risk? Any child, no matter their age, nationality, race, religion, socioeconomic status, education, sexuality, or gender, can be a victim of human trafficking. However, traffickers tend to target youth who have some of these vulnerabilities or risk factors. So some of the vulnerabilities that we see often are youth that have experienced conflict with their parents or caregivers, or maybe they're feeling misunderstood and having some feelings of insecurity. They want more independence. They want to test boundaries and take risks. But I don't know, I work with a lot of youth and this seems like very descriptive of, many young people. So it's just, I think that's just telling that really anybody can be vulnerable to trafficking. The last 2 points on the left side of the screen are so important. We see an attachment to consumer goods and access to a computer or smartphone. So again, very common of young people, but here, particularly in Chautauqua County, we live in a pretty economically depressed area. A lot of the families that we work with at CAP and in the Safe Harbor program, do not have access to all these consumer and material goods that other children may. So that can really be a vulnerability that traffickers really target. They notice, those youth that parents don't have extra money to buy them the new cell phone or the newest shoes or the newest tablet or to get their nails done or their hair done. And so traffickers, they groom and they target these youth that lack these consumer goods and these material goods and offer those in exchange for whatever that may be. And then access to a computer or smartphone is also huge. Beth talked a little bit about stranger danger, and that's certainly a thing. However, a lot of the time, I just like to point out that when we talk about trafficking, specifically, traffickers aren't just picking people up off the side of the road and targeting them. They're getting to know people. They're oftentimes within their social network. 77% of the time, a youth knows their trafficker. It's usually a trusted adult in their life. And oftentimes they're grooming them via a computer or smartphone. We have to be really careful about that. like the stranger danger thing. We tell our kids to stay away from strangers, not to talk to people they don't know, but then we send them up to their bedrooms and they have their cell phone or their computers, and who knows who they're talking to or who's actually on the other side of the screen. They may be portraying themselves to someone else. And then there's a long list of risk factors, that make someone more susceptible to trafficking: a history of sexual or physical abuse, interaction with the foster care or juvenile justice system. In New York State, it's estimated that over 80% of child trafficking cases, that youth has had a history in the foster care or juvenile justice system. So that's huge. And another reason why this program really fits at CAP, because we have those strong partnerships and connections with the foster care and juvenile justice system. So we can try to identify these youth prior to them experiencing trafficking. We try to identify that they might be at risk for trafficking, and then what supports can we put in place to prevent that from happening. Unhoused youth or youth who have run away, it's estimated that within 48 hours of being on the street unaccompanied, a youth will be solicited for commercial sex. So that's just huge. Undocumented or unaccompanied children, youth with developmental or intellectual disabilities, and youth who identify as LGBTQ+ are at a higher risk for trafficking. So outward appearances can be misleading. So it's important to recognize certain red flags and clues to help you determine if a child is being exploited. So for example, you may notice some of these red flags or warning signs. If there's a youth in your life who's constantly running away, or they're gone for a significant amount of time, and maybe, when they return, their story just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. They use street slang for sex. Maybe they have a significantly older partner, or spend a lot of time with a controlling person or an older adult. Their number of sexual partners is not consistent with age or development, or maybe they talk about sex in a way that is not appropriate with their age or development. Maybe, again, they've experienced multiple placements in foster care or the juvenile justice system. This one's huge. We've seen a lot of sexually provocative social media posts, which have indicated that there's something might be going on. Again, that those consumer goods, having items that they do not have the means to obtain, this has been a huge red flag. We, as Beth said, with the Safe Harbor program within CAP, most of our referrals do come from law enforcement or CPS, but we do get a lot of referrals from schools, which is huge and great. We have school counselors, social workers, nurses that contact me frequently saying, I've noticed something off about this student. And then they came to school with this brand new cell phone, brand new shoes, they have their hair done, their nails done, but I know that they don't have the money to afford these things. How are they getting those material goods? And that it really can be telling to us that something deeper might be going on. If the child's frequently absent from school, that can be a red flag, or if they're working more than they're in school, or reluctant to discuss how they make money or how they're able to afford the items that they do have. And reports of domestic violence and intimate partner violence are also warning signs of trafficking. So what are we doing here in Chautauqua County? We've talked a little bit about that, but two main kind of categories, I guess. We have the multidisciplinary response. So these cases are reviewed with the MDT that Beth spoke about. So every month in Jamestown and every other month in the northern end of the county, we review these cases with all of our partners. We have the Safe Harbor Critical Team. That team meets quarterly to review systems issues. What larger issues are going on? What is preventing us as service providers from identifying these cases or from effectively intervening? So we work together, and that the Safe Harbor Critical Team includes folks from all the different disciplines that we mentioned. We come together quarterly to kind of review our anti-trafficking initiative. We do a lot of collaboration with community partners. We've had several community members just express interest in trafficking and want to get involved. So we've started a community action team. I had mentioned the previous Safe Harbor coordinator, Jessica. She now works for Conduit Ministry. So she and I are leading this community action team to train and educate community members, kind of in a longer version of what I just spewed to you all, but training them to be able to relay this information to their networks, professional and social networks. And then we are part of the Western District of New York Human Trafficking Task Force. We're very fortunate here in Chautauqua County to have an investigator at the Sheriff's Department that is tapped as our lead liaison with that task force. So in addition to all of his other connections and education, he has a really great formal connection with every other law enforcement, entity in Western New York that's involved in trafficking. So that's really helpful. Oftentimes these cases span several counties, so we can kind of share information and work together that way. And then specifically with Safe Harbor, we've developed referral pathways tools and these quick screening and comprehensive assessments that I mentioned to really train and educate service providers to be able to identify youth in their programs that might be at risk for trafficking and how to best intervene. We do a lot of community outreach and awareness like this. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I think that since 2017, we've trained just about 1,800 professionals about child sex trafficking. So we're really proud of that, and we are always looking for other opportunities to reach new groups and share this information. I provide direct services. I do trauma counseling, and I help facilitate our girls group here at CAP, and constantly doing ongoing training and research to have the best evidence-based and evidence-supported information to share to other service providers and our multidisciplinary team partners about this issue. And that is pretty much it.
So you may be wondering how you could be part of this, a call to action. You can take the Stewards of Children training. We can come in and do that where you work or in your church or in your community. You can attend CAP fundraisers. We are going to eventually have a diamond dinner, I think in August in some format. Participate in our annual run. We're going to do that at Cassadaga Beach on May 15th. We have a virtual option as well as an in-person. Be an ambassador in the community about CAP. Tell people to call CAP and talk about it with other people. And if you're interested on a board seat, we do also have a fundraising committee, and they work very, very hard to put on our fundraisers. And sometimes it's fun to just do that and not be on the board. So always looking for new board committee members. And our current campaign is we're running Shine a Light on Child Abuse. April is Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. And so we bought blue bulbs to shine a light on child abuse. And you can go to our website, or you can call us, or you can send a check in the mail. But for $20, we'll give you a pretty blue bulb to put on your front porch or side porch. And what we're hoping is that it will spark conversation. People, I put them in my house, and my daughter said, "What do those mean?" And I told her all about it ad nauseum. So just a way that we can also take a stand that in our community, we're not going to tolerate child abuse, that we are going to be speaking up, and that we're going to be involved in our communities and our neighborhoods. So if you're interested in that, you can go to our website. And this is our social media information. You can follow us on Facebook, Child Advocacy Program. Kayleah also has Safe Harbor, Chautauqua County. And one time a month, she does like a lunch and learn where she talks about various aspects of human trafficking that you could dial in like you are here and listen to that. We have an Instagram account, just plain Cap Justice, and website is on there, www.capjustice.org. And then those are ways to contact us. You can always call us at that number, or through the website you can contact me, or you can do our email. So does anyone have any questions, burning questions they'd like us to answer? We'd be happy to do that.
Sure, everybody would like to know who's being apprehended for these terrible things, and how well that is going, and what sort of legal punishment is actually being handed out when people are apprehended in committing these things.
So, yeah, there are definitely legal ramifications that are happening, but it is a slow process. These are really convoluted cases. There's, let's see, I'm thinking of a case that has involved several children throughout the county that we had become involved with in the fall of 2019. That abuser who offended against several youth is now just being brought to grand jury. So that's like a year and a half later. Without giving away case information, one thing I would say if you wanted to just do a quick Google search, the Child Advocacy Program in the Post Journal or the Dunkirk Observer will lead you to several articles that mention us about the arrests of several folks. But that's one case that, yeah, so a year and a half later, he's being, just being indicted. And then earlier, or the end of last year in December, there was a young woman that was arrested in Jamestown for trafficking other teenagers, for trafficking teenagers. She was in her low 20s. But she's just, from what I know, they're kind of working on the behind the scenes part of the case where we're no longer really involved in that. And she's waiting up to hear what happens next for her trial. There was another gentleman in the Jamestown area that had trafficked several young girls and several young women. And I think, if I'm correct, I don't know, Beth, if you know this information, I think he's still waiting his federal sentencing.
It's been
And that
postponed.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, everything's been postponed. I think COVID has a lot to do with that. We had just really, although, so like I said, we started getting this funding in late 2016. The program really took off in 17, and these cases take so long. So then COVID hit in 2020 and just gave us basically a whole year waiting on these cases. So they are happening, they are moving forward. We're very lucky, like I said, to have that investigator with the Sheriff's Department that is primarily focused on trafficking. We have a huge support from our local law enforcement and state law enforcement, as well as federal agencies. We work very closely with Homeland Security and the FBI. So we know that these cases are being worked on. It's just a very, very slow process.
And we're always pleased when federal charges are laid as well, because federal charges often carry a higher penalty than state charges. So someone may have 15 years when they might have had a lesser sentence if they didn't have the federal charges. So the collaboration, we have FBI and Homeland Security here frequently. We really work well together to try to get the most that we can get for the case.
I have a question. Are these offenders in jail while they're awaiting their trials, or are they out on the street still offending?
The three situations that I was thinking about, as I spoke just now, they are all incarcerated. There are certainly other offenders that are not incarcerated at this point, but I don't think it has any, if I'm like reading between the lines, this is not like bail reform reasons why they're not in jail. Like there's a lot of people that perhaps we don't have the right, I mean, I'm not a law enforcement agent, so, can only say so much, but perhaps we don't have all the right pieces in place to bring any formal charges. So, these cases are really hard. Is one thing I had mentioned is that people are very unlikely to self-identify. People don't realize that they're being victimized. So this goes on for years and years and years until somebody in this circle is maybe educated that what's happening is a crime. And then it's building that relationship with that survivor to understand that they have been victimized. And then they come, hoping that maybe if that's what's best for them, they come to that realization and do want to seek help. But there's so many times that youth are engaged in this commercial sexual activity and they think, or they're being told by their trafficker that they're the ones that are perpetrating the law, that they're breaking the law, they're receiving money in exchange for sex, even though it's not their money, it's not being, given to them or whatnot. So it's really, there's so much more to just like, okay, we think this is happening and go arrest this person. No, it's really working with that youth, which sometimes, we've had youth that we've worked with for over a year that are finally coming to a point where they can recognize their own victimization and then speak up about that. Because without their disclosure, the case won't go forward.
Sounds like some difficult work. We're very grateful that you're in our community doing this. Very grateful. Thank you, Beth and Kayleah. We appreciate your very interesting talk. A donation to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund will be made in your honor, in your name.
Thank you.
We're this close to eradicating polio in the world. So you're part of that now. I forgot to do Happy Bucks, guys. So anybody got a Happy Buck? I know it's hard to do it after that talk.
I'm going to do a Happy Buck.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll do a Happy Buck for the Stewards of Children training. I would highly encourage everyone to participate in this 2-hour training. It's very informative. And it doesn't matter what you do or who you are, just having that knowledge to help, you know, combat this problem is worthwhile. So there's my happy buck. Stewards of children.
Anyone else have a happy buck?
Vince has
Oh,
a happy buck. I want to give a happy buck for Lou Meckley. Lou is on the Red Cross board, incredible board member, and obviously in CAP, his leadership over what couple years, I think, as chair is truly remarkable, and I just think he's an awesome example of community leadership and board leadership. So I'll put in $5 for Lou Meckley, and he did not make me pay that. So.
Any other? Greg, did you have one?
Sure, I'll have one. I have the opportunity this afternoon at 3 o'clock to go to beautiful downtown Westfield CVS store. And I'm going to wander into aisle 9 and somebody's going to stick a needle in my arm and I'll get my second shot for COVID. So that's a happy buck for that.
Good for you. Good for you. Any more?
Yeah, I have one. I have
Go ahead.
one, Joni. So I am leaving at the crack of dawn Wednesday to race down to South Carolina to help my mom celebrate her 95th birthday. And
Wow.
I've got my fingers crossed. I was told that they have opened up to allow visitors, so I may actually get to hold her hand.
Yes, yes, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Any other happy bucks? I just found out that my oldest daughter, who lives in Maine, is driving through the area and will be stopping overnight tomorrow night before she heads out to Oklahoma City. So I'll get to see my kid. Pretty excited. Next Monday, we'll be hearing from Jamestown Public School Superintendent, Dr. Whitaker. So that will be interesting, see how things are changing. And remember, Rotary opens opportunities. What opportunities will you see to make your community a better place? Thank you. We're adjourned. Bye-bye,
Great
everybody.
presentation. Thank you very much.